Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. We have quite a bit of news. Of course, the United States is in the middle of a series of strikes against what appear to be so far 4 Iranian targets. Some sources are saying all of the strikes have ended. That's already not true. Some sources are saying there are more strikes expected in the near future. We'll be covering those this evening. These strikes are in retaliation. Again, the United States moving after Iranians had downed an Apache helicopter that, at least according to the President of the United States. We'll give you some of that information because in a couple of minutes, because there are other developing situations here at home and around the world as well. For example, the protests outside the Karmelo Anthony verdict are not slowing down at all. So as a quick reminder, a Texas teen has been found guilty of murder over the fatal stabbing of teenager 17-year-old Austin Metcalf at a high school track meet last year. Karmelo was indicted on first-degree murder in that fatal stabbing at the track meet. Prosecutors called the stabbing, quote, senseless and plain and simple murder, while the defense argued that Anthony acted in self-defense. The murder charge carries a sentence of up to life in prison. It was a unanimous verdict on that first charge. And it seemed to shock a lot of people, although for most Americans, not that shocking. So in one moment that, according to the reporting, made the jury gasp at the audacity of the statement, the defense, Mike Howard, for Karmelo Anthony, attempted to argue that Austin Metcalf was responsible for his own stabbing. Why? Because he had essentially impaled himself. So the defense attorney, Mike Howard, argued that Austin Metcalf saw Karmelo Anthony pull a knife and then thrust himself forward on the deck of the Titanic onto the blade. And that's how it happened. No, not at all. There was a series of commercials on MTV that showed people accidentally falling into each other's arms. And it was basically a segment reminding you to be responsible about who you sleep with, because people don't accidentally fall into accidental situations regarding sex or violence. That's a common understanding with human people. You don't hold out a knife and go, boy, I sure am glad I have this knife here. And then someone falls on it, and then you're accused of murder. And again, this doesn't shock you. It doesn't. It doesn't shock normal Americans, those who are independents, those who are on the right, many of those on the left. However, there are a few that find this particularly difficult. Now, reportedly following the guilty verdict, Karmelo Anthony began sobbing and shaking as his lawyer asked if he could take him somewhere to pull him together. But Judge John Roach Jr. curtly denied the request, saying that Anthony was now in custody of the sheriff. Quote, things move differently now. Yes, indeed. It turns out that in some cases, actions do have consequences. Some are a little shocked about this, however. Here was one court TV panelist that was nearly moved to tears. She couldn't believe that this sweet young man was charged with murder and found guilty.
But besides wow, which a lot of us are feeling, thoughts?
Before we begin, why the just wow at the guilty verdict? Where's the wow? Where's the wow? A pretty simple cut and dried case. He went into an opposing team's tent where he wasn't supposed to be. He started antagonizing other players. He was told to leave 15, 16 times. And then, as soon as it appeared that maybe there was going to be a coach or staff from the school come over, or security from the school, he pulls a knife on Austin Metcalf and then stabs the boy to death. Well, where's the wow here? Anyway, sorry, I gotta let Big Glasses McTears give you her take.
I was not expecting the top charge. I really was thinking that they would see manslaughter, still guilty, but manslaughter, different sentencing, but...
Okay, guys, as a reminder, again, you don't need this reminder, but just for the record, we'll do our best here. Manslaughter is a crime for when you accidentally or do not intend for an individual to be murdered. If you pull out a weapon, if you pull out a knife, or you pull out a gun, or you bring a gun to a knife fight, or vice versa, you whip out the implement and attempt to use the implement on another individual, unless you are shaving the hair on his neck and then wiping the knife on a barber strop, that's attempted murder. It's not attempted manslaughter. It's not as though Austin Metcalf was just, like flipping the pocket knife around, or excuse me, Karmelo Anthony was flipping the pocket knife around, and then Austin Metcalf said, "Hey, can I see that?" And then the knife was tossed into the air and landed on him. It is ridiculous for a grown adult woman to think, how could they have charged him with murder? I mean, all he did was murder the kid.
Guilty of murder, so, that's heavy.
Wow.
And I hope everyone just does not seem like everyone's going to be calm. It seems like we're going to have a problem there.
Why? Why does it seem like we're not going to have calm? Why does it seem like we're going to have some kind of a problem here? Why immediately do we go to the same kind of O.J. Simpson style rhetoric? As though, oh, this could have been avoided if we had just created a two-tier justice system in which, if there is a white person who was attacked, then we let the other person out there get off easy. And then if there is a person of color attacked, then therefore we immediately assume the officer was a terrible racist and should be given super duper ultra life in prison and castigated anywhere and everywhere. Why does that have to be the place that we're going? And again, this is exactly where we went. So we had all of the usual suspects of highly intelligent legal discourse just run out immediately and suggest this was rigged. It was always going to end up with the black guy getting the harshest sentence possible. Like an all-white jury is not justice. Here's the problem there, Dr. Ellison Wiltz, or as her X handle is called, Queenie 4R Manola. Exciting. And that would be because it turns out the jury was not just a white jury. There were white individuals, men and women of various ages. There were Asians. There were Hispanic individuals. There was a Middle Eastern woman wearing a head covering and an Indian woman. So, I mean, again, I'm so sorry to have to break it to you, but the whole diversity thing, there are a lot of different flavors and varieties in this great Baskin Robbins that we call a planet Earth. And it just so happens that just because the jury is not a group, in this case, of 18 individuals who share your exact background, exact color, exact faith, exact whatever. Nope, the defense and the prosecution agreed on this jury. So moving aside, now we have the justification. So again, you have the Black Panthers run out immediately because, again, you got to stoke a little racial tension. God forbid that it's just, wow, he stabbed the person. He really shouldn't have stabbed the person. Case closed. Instead, we're going to do this lollygagging goofiness. As Nick Sordor sent this clip over to the show, we now get to the anytime a white man or a white child can go and put their hands aggressively on anybody, then it's self-defense to stab them immediately, which, hoo boy, here you go.
To protect black people. Anytime a white man or a white child can go and put their hands aggressively on anybody and something like this occur, it's self-defense. It's self-defense. You put your hand on me and see how I respond.
Yeah, okay, so if you were to put your hand on her and, for example, say, hey, I think you need to calm down a little bit, there's not legal justification to go, knife, stab, 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 stab. That's not a thing. This weirdo idea that self-defense only applies when you are violating the law, or you are violating, in this case, as the individual was not supposed to be in the opposing team's tent, started antagonizing the other players in there. And someone said, dude, you need to leave. And then he gets out the knife and stabs the kid to death. No, absolutely not. Speaking of the Black Panthers, here they are out there, obese, proud, and loud.
We gotta tell our kids the truth. That this is a racist country. We gotta tell them the truth. Who don't get stop that cool ass. Nobody wanna hear about what we do to each other.
Ah, yes, okay, exciting. Ah, yes, it's a racist country. Why is it a racist country? Because if you stab somebody, you get thrown in jail for it. This is some Brandon Johnson out of Chicago logic.
Talk about what they doing to us. White folks kill white folks. Mexicans kill Mexicans. We ain't trying to hear no cool today.
Okay, so, but if the white person kills a white person, for example, I happened to look through those good old-fashioned Texas legal records. I just so happened to find multiple instances of white individuals killing white individuals. Native Americans killing Native Americans of the same tribe, by the way, for those who weren't asking. Mexicans and killing Mexicans. And you know what? They received sentences similar to this Karmelo Anthony who stabbed and killed Austin Metcalf. He's not special. So anywho, it continues, and it continues to the point where there are individuals trying to calm it down and it isn't working. Radio crew, we're going to send you to the commercial. We're going to continue on the live stream. Lots to cover tonight. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal.
What if you could have the most reliable fiber-powered...
Sorry, let me get a little extra commercial things you guys don't have to hear out of the way. Anyway, here we go.
The court has done what it's done. Nothing you can do. I understand how you feel. I understand. But it's time to just go home in peace. Is that okay?
Hell no!
Okay, hold on, wait. Hold on.
What's wrong with going home in peace? Why is this argument that if I don't like the way the jury rules, then I get to run around and break stuff and burn stuff and attack stuff and call for racial revolution and other kinds of nonsense? Why are we doing this? Immediately, the influencers took to the cameras and, called for more violence because, of course.
Sources have told me that they found Karmelo Anthony guilty of killing that white boy. And honestly, Chet, you can't really expect much in America. I didn't think you would get found guilty, but I'm not surprised by this. When you know what the criminal justice system is and what it's really meant to do, you don't get surprised at outcomes like this. They'll let that Rick Chow out, but they won't free Karmelo Anthony. A man who actually had his life threatened by two big white boys. If it was me, I'd stab both of them niggas. But
that's exciting. See, well, this country, it's the excellent. Thank you, random walking man number 47. Thrilling stuff indeed. Oh, I would have killed his twin brother too. Ah, yes. Totally not unhinged, insane comments. It's just about justice. It's not about violence and kind of racial spurning. By the way, the same kind of framing happened today in Congress. We're going to get to this in just a little bit because Jasmine Crockett, who was so outraged that we would cover the SPLC, who was funding parts of the KKK, who was encouraging and planning certain events on behalf of the KKK. Jasmine Crockett's really, really, really outraged and upset about this, and it's all about race, and she's angry that she didn't win her primary in Texas. So she's just here to ask a few questions and decides to be really, really racist in the meantime.
You know what? I hate that we have spent this much time, on SPLC, and we've not addressed the elephant in the room, the literal elephant in the room.
Okay, literal means I should see the camera pan away and either see a real elephant straight out of the Jungle Book or J.B. Pritzker, one of the two. I'll take either. A literal elephant in the room. There are no elephants in the room, sweetie honey baby. Learn to use words. Ask someone for a dictionary and or a thesaurus.
The vast majority of the people on that side of the aisle, and for those of you that are at home, let me tell you, when I say that side of the aisle, I'm talking about the Republicans, the ones that brought this hearing. And again, you've heard that this is not the first hearing, but the vast majority of them are white men.
Oh my gosh, I looked at the Democrat side of the aisle. Do you know what there's a lot of elected to their positions? A lot of white men. Oh no, quick, someone get my pearls. Oh no, oh, the horror.
White men are lecturing people of color because the vast majority, actually, any semblance of diversity comes from this side of the aisle.
So this is the argument. Oh, well, it's only the Democrats bring any kind of diversity. These white supremacists, they're the problem. She did step too far and got exactly what she deserved from Representative Wesley Hunt from Texas, who has a couple of things to say when this garbage is trotted out time and time again.
If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. Does that sound like a hater or not?
That sounds like a racial stereotype.
Okay, sounds good to me.
I had a previous colleague that talked about seeing a black pilot and what that would mean to Charlie Kirk's comments. And it's funny, black pilot here, by the way. I actually went to flight school, West Point graduate, learned how to fly the Apache helicopter, went to flight school in 2005. You see, there was no DEI. We just simply competed with everyone else, and I was selected, fought in combat, went on to fly 55 combat air missions, and nobody gave a damn what I looked like because I got there on merit. What DEI does is it lowers standards based on race and based on gender.
Correct. And this is, again, something that you here in the United States understand in a common sense manner. The reason we discuss this is because the same type of racial stoking, white supremacy, racist nonsense in other countries has turned into genuine race war. We're going to get to that in a second. Don't go anywhere. We got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
So in the meantime, while here at home in the United States, we have congresswomen lecturing everyone about how, oh, white supremacy is so terrible, and then protests outside after the guilty verdict delivered when a young black teenager stabbed a young white teenager, and the court looked at it and said, looks like the stabbing is the issue here, not the black or the white or the brown or the whatever. But we still had to get, the white supremacy, it's so terrible and the problem. Meanwhile, on the other side of the globe, other side of the pond, there was an attempted beheading, the second attempted beheading, by the way, in recent memory for the British Isles. But in Northern Ireland, an unnamed man so far in his 40s, a local resident, who is currently in the hospital with serious life-changing injuries, including significant slash wounds to his face, neck, and back. Witnesses in the video described frenzied stabbing and sawing motions to the head and neck area. Some reports mention various eye injuries. He remains in serious but stable condition. We're not going to play the clip of this attack because it's horrifying. I mean, it's a horrifying attack. The best that we can do for you here is to show a clip, and we'll play that little explanation here in a minute. This is the Sudanese national. Initially was reported as Somali. We'll get to some of that in a minute. Later it was confirmed as a migrant from Sudan. He has been charged with attempted murder and he's in custody. He entered the United Kingdom in February of 2023, reportedly via Dublin using an asylum loophole, because obviously the guy who was attempting to behead an individual, he needed asylum. Oh, man. And was granted leave to remain asylum status until 2028. And there are individuals right now that are marching in the UK, that are marching, for example, in Northern Ireland and Belfast. And they are outraged because we are once again looking at another case of a migrant who, not because of the color of their skin, but because they embrace horrible, barbaric cultures that come and have made their home in Africa and in Asia. And these cultures, these third worldism cultures, often, which are Islamic in nature, are brought upon other Western countries, and you are told, and I am told, and they are told in their countries, that if you don't allow these people, because they just want asylum, if you don't allow them in, and then stay out of the areas of the city, and then look the other way when there are rape gangs, and then look the other way when there are stabbings, and look the other way when there are beheadings, and look the other way, and look the other, well then you're racist, you're a white supremacist. And it is no longer, I pray, no longer something that is able to be used to keep the native people of the British Isles down. Because what we've seen for the last several years is the Labour Party in the United Kingdom going, you can't say so racist. How can you? Even right now, after individuals are outraged, because here we are again, when individuals from Somalia, from Sudan, from like countries come with a certain culture in mind, whether that be Sikh adjacent culture or Islamic culture, you never really have these kind of crimes from Christians from Nigeria or Botswana. Never really see these kind of crimes. When was the last time you saw a story in the United States, or in Western Europe for that matter, when a migrant from South Korea, Vietnam, Japan beheaded someone? Do you know of any of those stories? Oh, you don't know? Me neither. I haven't seen any of those stories. But however, whenever it comes to an individual from a third world migrant culture who comes to the country and commits violent crimes, all of a sudden, the real threat it's that Norm Macdonald joke. You and I understand that the issue is in fact the culture behind it, but the left says, well, actually it's the Islamophobia that could emanate from it. And by the way, the response from people who have had enough, there are now protesters that are essentially, some of them are out protesting in the streets. And some people over in the British Isles, there's no better way to tell you this. It is the God's honest truth from the clips that I'm seeing. They're out for blood. So there are groups of individuals that are, according to some of the audio in this clip, it's kind of hard to hear in a broadcast setting, that are hunting for those who are out on the streets, that are migrants, that are participants in this kind of culture. Now, again, this has really, really upset the parliament already. And we'll get to some of the parliament, pearl clutching, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. He's all upset. What do you mean alien culture? That kind of crap. But the Northern Ireland territory is famous for not really responding well to disagreements in governance and a loss of certain rights and freedoms. And so what some may have expected right now, and I can't play the audio because it's laced with the language one would expect to see when you see a car burning, rolling down the hill and crashing into an apartment building. There are quite a few fires and riots that are currently underway over in the United Kingdom, specifically in Northern Ireland. Rioters are currently breaking into migrant houses and multiple occupation HMOs, a form of taxpayer-funded housing for asylum seekers in Belfast, and are setting them ablaze. So there are some people that are rather upset at this. But again, what's going to be the focus? Not the beheadings, not the rape gangs, not the stabbings, not the police showing up to the scene like with Henry Novak and arresting the guy who was stabbed, because the foreigners of an alien culture said, oh, he was being racist. Oh, I mean, he actually stabbed us. That kind of nonsense. So here's from the Parliament, Jim Allister. He's a traditional unionist voice party of Northern Ireland. And he asks the question, what is it going to take for us to stop, to shut the door, to close this? And you have to hear the response from Hilary Benn, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Of course, he's the Labour Party. It is gaslighting to the extreme.
But what I want to know, and what I know my constituents want to hear, is what will be done to stop the importation of an alien culture that thinks it's appropriate to try and behead someone.
Now again, where did he say the color of the skin of the individual? Did he say anything about an individual's race? That's going to be nope. He said the cultures, the culture. If a white person embraces the radical culture of Islam, shout out to Fort Hood, and carries out terrorist attack, that's a result of the culture. If a brown person, whatever that means, whether they're from India, whether they're from Central or South America, doesn't matter. If a person, regardless of the skin tone, embraces a violent culture, it is the culture the person has chosen to embrace. And then those actions carried out on behalf of that culture are in fact a problem.
Within the United Kingdom.
So state.
Well, I would say I'm sorry that the honourable gentleman used the word alien culture.
I'm so sorry he used the term alien culture. Doesn't he know you're not supposed to do that? Oi, mate, you got a licence for saying alien culture?
Because what exactly is he referring to?
This is the gaslighting. And this is the gaslighting whether we're talking about Graham Plattner or James Tallarico or Chuck Schumer, or we're talking about Jennifer Welch, or we're talking about the legacy left media, or we're talking about the Labour Party and sometimes the Conservative Party over in the UK, or whether we're talking about a number of issues regarding this stuff. There's an online meme of all things in the world to relate this to. There is a meme that references an older tweet, and you saw me pass by it earlier if you're watching, in which an account called Millennial Woes says, it is amazing how much leftist discourse or conversation with someone on the left is just them pretending not to understand things, thus making the conversation impossible. And the memes that come from it, pretending not to understand things award. All of this nonsense comes from individuals who, for the sake of feeling morally superior, pretend not to understand the thing that you know quite well, that we all know quite well. The culture that openly says death to America, that wants to perpetuate violence and rape and trafficking and all other evils upon the world, just so happens to be objectively bad. And it doesn't matter if there is some moderate in your local region that says, well, it's not, I mean, come on now. I mean, we really shouldn't cast any group blanketing nonsense. No, it is a common sense, a genuine objective fact. Certain cultures are incompatible with the West. And if the United States allows its people to be led down this nonsensical path that Jasmine Crockett and Henry Raskin and Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and all others are going to talk about, as we'll get to in a minute here, then it will end up in the exact same place that Europe is in right now. Radio Crew, we're going to send you to the commercial and talk a little bit more about this over on the Tony Kinnett cast. We'll catch you guys on the other side of that break. sorry, sometimes it's a little awkward sending the commercial stuff over to break, because we can't just, you can't really do that. So we have to kind of, adjust some things over on the, the BRB side so that the FCC doesn't, shoot me in the kneecaps. Now, speaking of getting shot in the kneecaps, Tim Walz and Keith Ellison are in very, very deep trouble. And the reason that Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, and Attorney General Keith Ellison are in pretty deep trouble. Why should we care, essentially? I've seen a lot of the comments. I hear you. You say, look, I don't really care until we actually see the handcuffs on, until we see the trial, until we see people going to jail. When there is a high-profile individual that is under investigation, when there is a high-profile individual who is at not just an investigation, but an investigation into how they carried themselves during an investigation, which is what this is, you're not just going to see the FBI show up blaring the cops theme music and then slap cuffs on him and then, send him out the door. It isn't quite that simple. However, being criminally referred to the Department of Justice is a big deal. It is. And these are the steps that we have seen result in a lot of members of Congress who have recently resigned, members of the press who have stepped away from their positions, individuals who, yes, are eventually arrested, who are indicted, who are brought before a jury, and then, yes, are in fact convicted and found guilty under a court of law. So under the case regarding Tim Walz and Keith Ellison being in significant trouble here, the vice president made it perfectly clear, I believe in an interview over with, I know it's on Fox. I think it's with Jesse Waters. But I suppose we'll find out here in a second. Here's the vice president on their referral to the Department of Justice.
And I guess now I can make a bit of breaking news because I left the White House to come here to do this interview with you. And before I did, we actually referred this particular case to the Department of Justice for a full criminal investigation. We are not going to do what the Biden administration did and make judgments of the law before all the facts are in. But here's what's particularly troubling about this to me is Jesse, you had people within Governor Walz's office who were saying, you know what, this looks like fraud. It looks like these Somalian illegal immigrants are doing something that's very shady. And then you had people who shut them down, who shut these whistleblowers down and said, you're a racist or you're a xenophobe for asking questions about where taxpayer money is going. What that means to me, Jesse, is that clearly people weren't taking fraud seriously. Whether it rises to the level of a criminal violation, we're going to investigate it. And of course, if it does rise to that level, we're going to prosecute it. We have to.
And here's why this matters. So with regard to Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison, on record, there are a number of whistleblower complaints about fraud that was occurring in progress in Minnesota. Tim Walz came out and said, well, the buck stops here with me. And I say that, well, I've sent people to prison and that's what we're doing here in Minnesota. And then whistleblowers pointed out, no, maybe 1 out of 5 you would take seriously. 1 out of 5 whistleblower complaints, 1 out of 5 cases you would take seriously. But in the meantime, you would make the decision to call anyone who talked about the other 4 out of 5 or even characterized the first out of the 5 as a group of individuals acting according to their culture. You would say they were racist. And under the United States statutes regarding a federal investigation or even a state investigation in Minnesota regarding fraud, whether it's immigration fraud, wire fraud, whether it's representing a nonprofit incorrectly, etc., if you push some of that down, you can be liable for a whole host of charges. We're going to bring the radio crew back in. We're going to talk about it. And then, of course, the SPLC, tons to talk about tonight. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
What's going on in there? The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
369 girls wanna drink wine.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, Attorney General Keith Ellison of Minnesota are in some pretty significant trouble. And this all goes down to, I think, a pretty clear statement from the Republican majority whip today. Here you go.
Chairman Comer's report confirms what we all know to be true. Walz and Ellison created the perfect conditions for fraud. knowingly looked the other way when it was discovered and committed, and left hard-working taxpayers, disabled Americans that our conference chair was just referring to, and hungry children out to dry in the process. All because they were afraid of being called racist. Somali fraudsters may be holding the smoking gun, but Walz and Ellison handed it to them, locked and loaded. Thankfully, the Trump administration is putting an end to fraud in this country.
Now, we've talked about this. Obviously, he's about to say that, the White House has done X, Y, and Z to combat fraud. I do want to give you a couple of the details here. So according to Congressman Rich McCormick, quote, Tim Walz knew about fraud in Minnesota's social programs back in 2019. He had the power to stop the payments. He did not. Remember, we have talked about this several times, and this is where Keith Ellison is honestly in deeper crap than Tim Walz. Because there were times where the Trump administration, whether it was via Scott Bessent, Secretary of the Treasury, whether it was Dr. Oz in charge of Medicaid and Medicare, whether it was a number of state or federal officials saying, hey, we are turning off the tap. We are cutting it off until you get things figured out. No funding on these avenues. And then federal judges, at the request of Attorney General Keith Ellison, said you have to turn the funding back on. Well, it turns out that when you order that, knowing that there is fraudulent activity occurring, you could in fact become a part, an accessory to that crime continuing. If I know there is a fire that is currently going on, and I get a call working at the fire department to go address that fire, and I say, well, I don't really think that's, really my job. Honestly, I think the fire department's probably needed at the Memorial Day parade, so sorry. I become an accessory to that arson or that fire which is taking place. And we're going to find out how much Tim Walz and Keith Ellison, according to their internal communications, and by the way, if you want a little bit of insight on this particular investigation, one of the reasons that Tim Walz is not running for re-election in this gubernatorial race in Minnesota is because he was terrible at hiding communication. In today's day and age, there are a number of applications that one can use to hide their communications. Perhaps you use the encrypted messaging app Signal, or you use WhatsApp, or if you're Graham Plattner, you use Kick Messenger to message minor. Excuse me, we'll get to that later. But Tim Walz, in this particular instance, he wasn't too good at hiding things. Oh, let me just check the Facebook here and respond. Oh, they're all racists and we won't be investigating nothing. Well, that leaves a whole host of paper trails, and it's going to be interesting. And again, according to Rich McCormick, after Walz and Ellison, who had the power to stop payments, chose not to, $300 million after that point. So again, they knew about the fraud. They said no. Calendar mark. After that date, $300 million in child nutrition funds were stolen. Up to $9 billion in Medicaid funds were lost or at serious risk, not given to you, not given to your fellow Americans, not given to fellow Minnesotans, gone. Absolutely wiped out.
Erased from existence.
Quote, his team then retaliated against state employees who tried to stop it. Correct. Again, going after the legislative auditor to do so. Quote, this is not incompetence. This is a choice. The Oversight Committee's report makes this clear. Time for President Trump's anti-fraud task force to go in and find every single dollar. Representative Pat Fallon makes this clear. The difference here, it's the line between criminal negligence and wild incompetence. To put this very plainly, either he's very, very shady, or at the very best, and I mean just at the superest duperest, most optimistic cloud and sunshine mural on the side of the Somali Leering Center, happiness and rainbows. Tim Walz is the most incompetent idiot to ever holster a public office as high as the governor of Minnesota.
Governor, there's been billions stolen over 7+ years right under your nose, and really there's only two explanations. It's either you were in on it or you weren't smart enough to see it. It's either criminal negligence or wild incompetence. And the only way this kind of fraud can reach this scale is if there's people in power that are colluding and collaborating and willfully blinding themselves to the realities around them. And oversight, when we do investigations, it's rare for us to have whistleblowers because they face retribution and punishment and resentment, and they can be ostracized, and it's difficult and it's uncomfortable, and sometimes it's even dangerous. So when we have when we're having an investigation and we have even a couple of whistleblowers, it's very valuable to us because they provide invaluable insight.
So I hear often, whenever we're talking about investigatory matters, I hear often that, well, it's just a bunch of Republicans trying to showboat. In a committee like this, in an investigation, this is not the showboating. This is not. This is not like the big clippable moment. There's 2 more minutes here where he outlines in explicit detail a number of concerns that the committee has just based on simple financial regulation, understanding, basic investigations that those who are involved in, for example, looking into accountants who cook the books, all the way up to state auditors and treasurers who aren't doing their job, in that line of highly toxic financial investigative work and law enforcement. There's no time to do all of the podium Barbie yipping and nonsense. So when Tim Walz is being leveled at, not by, again, former Attorney General Pam Bondi, but he is being hit by a number of investigative matters from who is going to be soon the new Attorney General of the United States, currently acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, and congressmen who are not out there doing big camera, big snippy reels and TikToks and all other kinds of nonsense. It's a significant issue for Keith Ellison. Because all of the TikTok and boisterous and excitable influencery members of the Republican Party are more than happy to pick up the axe and swing it. But it is incumbent on, yes, dare I say, the more establishmentarian technocrats of the Republican Party to load the axe with as much bearing weight and the sharpest edge possible. Because you do not just want Tim Walz and Keith Ellison, if they are charged, to simply pop themselves off of the hook. You need the hook to sink in and sink in deep for the indictment to go all the way through trial and to stick. This isn't an 86-47 Comey style of indictment. It's, well, he said and she said and then they said. No. This needs to be cut, dried, loaded for bear, and it needs to come down hard and fast. That appears to be how the Department of Justice is tracking this investigation. Speaking of coming down hard and fast, the Southern Poverty Law Center. Hoo boy. We're going to get into some of the clarifying stuff because the Southern Poverty Law Center, which my colleague over at the Daily Signal, Tyler O'Neill, has dug into probably more than any of the investigative columnists and journalists that I have seen for a while. Excellent work. Highly encourage you to go check out his writing. The Southern Poverty Law Center, who for years labeled any conservative, any family-oriented research council group, independent groups, never a left-wing group, never an Islamic group, which we're going to get to, never an LGBTQ group, never Anne's Revenge, setting fire and attacking women's crisis pregnancy centers. No, the Southern Poverty Law Center would go after the Family Research Council or Moms for Liberty or Charlie Kirk. They're in trouble because they got caught funding directly the KKK and doing the same kind of shady shenanigans, such as when the FBI said, hey, you guys want to go kidnap Gretchen Whitmer? The KKK said, hey, you want to hold a rally in Charlottesville? We're going to get into some of that because this congressional committee hearing, where some leftists tried to be really flamboyant, yeah, we got Jasmine Crockett asking some questions, the other side of things gets really intense. And yeah, of course, Graham Plattner, who's in his primary election today in Maine, we'll get to that here soon, also comes into it. Radio crew, we're going to catch this up and then we're going to move on the live stream while you guys are over on the commercial break. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right, so a House committee. What's the big diggity-dong-dang deal? Well, when the House committee decided to tackle the Southern Poverty Law Center this time over the fraud indictment, the House Judiciary Committee questioned SPLC interim president Brian Fair on charges of wire fraud, bank fraud, money laundering tied to over $4.1 million in payments to informants in hate groups from 2010 to 2023. Republicans highlighted one informant's role in planning, funding, and carrying out the 2017 Charlottesville rally, and then the SPLC making a ton of money on the revenge campaign afterward. Fair defended the payments as well as standard intelligence work shared with law enforcement. So standard that no one else does it like this at all. You're certainly not allowed to say, hey, you guys want to go commit some crimes? Here are a list of crimes I think you should commit. You can't, You can't do that. That's not a thing. No. So anywho, Jamie Raskin from Maryland gets down to business right away with a bunch of whining and gaslighting. Again, a lot of pretending not to understand things, as only Jamie Raskin can do. Here you go.
The purpose of these operations is obviously to derail and prevent white supremacist hate crimes and actions, both the kinds of hate crimes and shooting sprees we see all around us, but even...
Well, not all the kind of shooting sprees that we see behind us, because the SPLC will say absolutely nothing about Muslim groups. Not a thing. Because CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, would have a heart attack, a stroke, and then 3.5 ulcers. So, no, absolutely not. Also, I love that they just exist to stop the bad guys. Guys, Antifa stands for anti-fascist. And if you don't like Antifa, well, then I guess you must be pro-fascist. That's retarded. That's not how this works, Sunshine.
More massive terrorist attacks like the Oklahoma City federal building bombing, which took the lives of 168 Americans, many of them children, who were in a daycare center when the white nationalists unleashed their terrorism on the people of Oklahoma.
That was in 1995. 1995. And one of the reasons that I know so much, in a kind of a weird case, is that on the newspapers, the day that I was born, in June of 95, that the papers that were saved, kind of time capsule style, were all about the arrests and the trials of the Oklahoma City bombers and terrorists. I'm sorry, the SPLC was brought before them because of a series of actions from 2010 to 2023. You know what year doesn't occur between 2010 and 2023 for the mathematicians out there? 1995. No, not at all remotely. Just because O.J. Simpson was a good football player does not mean that expunges him from killing his wife. Just because you did something really, really good once upon a time does not mean that you're immune from being held accountable for crimes that you committed later. Duh. Again, things that the average American, the normal person, understands clearly, concisely, not at all a mystery to you, me, and Dupree. I'm astounded. So we've got, again, Pramila Jayapal, we've got Brandon Gill. There's a ton here to dive into. We're going to bring the radio crew back from commercial one more time for them. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
So, again, we're keeping track of the situation in Iran, the United States, and the Iranian Revolutionary, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps exchanging some fire, drones flying over Iraq. We'll keep you guys up to date on that. Again, we're also keeping an eye on protests outside the Karmelo Anthony guilty verdict down in Frisco, Texas. And we're also keeping an eye on the riots over in Belfast in Northern Ireland after the Sudanese migrant attempted to behead a local, and the Brits and the Irish are really, really upset. Oh, don't you go blaming the Muslim migrants now. So, in the meantime, the Southern Poverty Law Center, who is in trouble for encouraging and funding the very white supremacist kind of stuff, because it wasn't happening organically, as my colleague Tyler O'Neill points out at the Daily Signal. It's not organic enough to just happen on its own. White supremacy wasn't happening enough by itself. So the SPLC had to sneak in because, oh man, well, who's going to pay them if there's no white supremacy to fight? Well, then how are people going to give us money? So they poured some gasoline on it, up to and including funding and planning some of the white supremacist rallies and events and encouraging people to go and actually commit various federal crime. And why? Because this turns into, again, the reiteration of the same tired crap. Pramila Jayapal, who is about as useful as a colander at holding soup. Pramila Jayapal repeating the very fine people hoax. Oh, it didn't work for Kamala, sweetheart. It's not going to work for you. Anyway, here you go.
Condoning of extreme white nationalists directly from the White House. In Trump's America, white supremacists at the Charlottesville rally are, quote, very fine people, even after images and videos showed participants making Nazi salutes.
Again, not even close to workable anymore. Best of luck to you. We're going to talk about Brandon Gill, and again, this relates to some of the primary stuff a little bit later, because the interim CEO, Brian Fair of the Southern Poverty Law Center, he did answer some questions about Graham Plattner up in Maine. But again, what was this entire hearing? It was the Southern Poverty Law Center being cooked and then baked until golden brown at 375, while the entire room laughed at them. So here you can see Brian Fair just getting fried with more than a couple nuclear bombs by Jim Jordan. Here you go.
Mr. Fair, did the Southern Poverty Law Center use donor money to have field sources attend extremist rallies across the country?
That's the only question, by the way. Did you violate the law? Do you notice, again, the way that some states and bodies tend to prosecute crime versus others? One says, did you do the crime? The other says, well, hold on, what color and sex and religion? Hold on, we got it. Stop. Let me get out my abacus. I mean, we got to see, are you Jewish, perhaps? Okay, well, that factors in. And are you okay, well, then we got to, how many tweets do you? That kind of garbage. The right in this case, again, Jim Jordan saying, did you violate the law? And the reason this is interesting is because, is this a yes or no question? Yes, it is. Do we end up getting a yes or no answer from the SPLC?
Mr. Chairman.
Of course.
It's a simple question. Did you use your donor money for that purpose?
We used donor money.
It's a yes or no.
Paid confidential informants to infiltrate extremist organizations.
Did the Southern Poverty Law Center use donor dollars to have field sources host extremist rallies throughout the country?
Not to my knowledge.
That's not what the indictment says. Did the Southern Poverty Law Center use donor dollars to have field sources grow existing chapters of extremist groups?
Now, again, the reason that he says, well, no, not to my knowledge, well, the indictment cites very specific sources in which case they did. I thought the argument was, well, they had to do it. That's what Raskin said, didn't he? Well, they had to. Oh, it's normal. Law enforcement does it all the time. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, we didn't do it. And if we did do it, it was a very good thing.
Mr. Chairman, as I said earlier.
It's a simple question, Mr. Fair. Did you use donor money for the purpose I just read? I'm reading straight from the superseding indictment.
And Mr. Chairman, the indictment will be managed and responded to by counsel in the criminal case that's
Well, you
pending.
just answered a question from Mr. Raskin concerning the indictment. He asked you, did field sources send information to the FBI that help with things? You answered that question.
That's a matter of public knowledge.
That's in our public filing.
Did the Southern Poverty Law Center use...
Again, they say, oh, it's in our public filing we did that. No, because they set up shell companies and didn't tell their donors. They didn't tell their donors that they were setting up shell companies in order to pay informants.
Donor money to have field sources create new chapters of extremist groups.
Again, Mr. Chairman.
Did the Southern Poverty Law Center use donor money to recruit new individuals into those extremist groups?
I assume you don't want me to answer since you're not giving me time to answer.
No, I'm giving you time to answer because that's a yes or. Did you use your donors' money for that purpose? Yes or no?
Again, those issues will be resolved in the pending allegations against the SPLC.
So again, he is giving him the opportunity and the time to answer. He's either not answering or he's obfuscating. And these aren't even leading questions. Again, you've heard leading questions before. When did you stop beating your wife? He says, did the SPLC do, for the congressional record, Dr. Wilson, did the SPLC do X? Yes or no? Not, did they think they were doing it? Well, were they bad? Were they stinky? Were they great? Were they heroic? Were they sad? No, none of that. Yes or no? Did you do the thing? It's not leading. Genuine question. Should be pretty simple.
If the answer is no, you could say no.
We have asserted that the allegations are false.
Did the Southern Poverty Law Center use donor money to have field sources make donations to extremist group leaders and purchase materials for cross burnings? It's alleged in the indictment. Did it happen?
We've alleged that those allegations are false.
Did Southern Poverty Law Center use donor dollars to have field sources create racist paraphernalia that extremist groups sold at rallies?
We've alleged that those allegations are false.
Okay, how about this? What is Fox Photography?
Fox Photography, as you know, is the shell company that the SPLC set up in order to pay their informants. Again, you can't do that. You can't set up little shell companies in order to encourage individuals to again, you're saying in informant territory stuff, you can't violate the law like this. That's not allowed. And so what does he do? Fair starts chugging water so he doesn't have to answer. Incredible. I mean, seriously, incredible. That's not good. That is not good at all. So then, just because, you know, we're going to get into extreme, bizarro, awful nonsense territory. You know, we bring up the individual Alveda Celeste King. She's a niece of the civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She's a daughter of civil rights activist Alfred Daniel King and his wife, Naomi Barber King. And the SPLC, because they don't like that she says, you know, your character and not your color matter, they've labeled her super duper hateful as well. So she was also brought to testify. And then, of course, what did those on the left do? And the SPLC CEO do? He's like, well, not that black woman. I mean, you know, only the black people that we like are allowed to, you know, say things. Incredible stuff. Radio crew, I'm sorry, we have to send you guys out because it's the end of your broadcast time. We have a couple of TV crews who are staying with us for the meantime, you know. YouTube.com/Daily Signal. That's where you'll find the live stream. We've got way more to cover tonight. We haven't even gotten to Iran. So come join us. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, and first on 93 WIBC. All right, while the radio people are figuring out how to type in youtube.com and joining us on the live stream, let's see them going after, again, Charlie Kirk and the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Southern Poverty Law Center, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Fair, I don't want you to be left out of this conversation. Your organization has labeled Dr. King and Charlie Kirk and others. Do you regret that? Will you recant it? Or are you going to double down and say that these people, including the martyred Charlie Kirk, in fact, somehow deserve to be on your hate list for they're constantly talking about bringing people together, talking about the teachings of the Bible and the like?
Congressman Issa, as I said in my statement.
Now, wait a second. No. I heard your statement. Well, I only want an answer to your question in 11 seconds left. Well, are you going to recant, yes or no? And if you're not going to, please don't tell me it's because now you're under charges. Your organization did it as much as 16 years ago. Will you take back any part of that, or is your hate list stand as your position of your organization as its head today?
The SPLC will continue to expose
so the answer is yes.
And extremism.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so the answer is yes. So again, it doesn't matter. They're going to go after whoever it is. And this was Alveda King's response. Apropos, well said.
Racism. I reject hatred. I reject white supremacy. I reject any ideology that seeks to elevate one group of people above another. But I also reject the notion that Americans who hold traditional Christian beliefs should be treated as threats or terrorists simply because we disagree with a prevailing political thought.
What a concept. You don't have to call Christians terrorists because you disagree with them on where you are on the ballot.
Today, I still have a dream. I dream that one day we will move beyond black power and white power and embrace God's power and human dignity. I dream that Americans will one day see each other not as enemies, but as neighbors. I dream that we will hear each other, see each other, and recognize that every human life has value from the womb to the tomb and beyond.
Again, this also goes against one of the SPLC's encouragement that anyone out there who dares decry abortion and the slaughtering of children, biological humans of their very own individual DNA alive by the scientific definition in the womb, that slaughtering those, I mean, that's not exactly pro-life, pro-human, pro-anything. It's pretty cruel and disgusting. And if you say that, the SPLC will again put you on the hate map. But the groups like Jane's Revenge, who do go out and try to burn down those women's crisis pregnancy centers, those don't make it to the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate map. And Representative Lance Gooden pointed that out today. We're going to have to move on because, again, there's quite a bit of nonsense that we could share from this hearing. There's two last things that I'll say because I want to get to some of the primary information. It's 8:00 p.m. Eastern time. There are some additional polls that have closed, but I would be remiss if I didn't share, given what we've talked about. The question is to what about groups who actively commit violent crimes, not back in 1995, but right now, right the bleep now, like those in Dearborn, Michigan that once a month go out and try to kill Jews and Christians? What about the groups that openly perpetuate violence against Asians in New York? What about the groups that are standing out and calling for violence outside today, outside of Karmelo Anthony's verdict? What about them? And of course, the SPLC president doesn't want to answer, and that gets him laughed at by the entire room.
How many extremist Islamic groups do you have of the 1,500 or so organizations you have on your hate map?
Again, anyone can go to our website.
My office has been looking over it and we can't really find one.
Again, it is the SPLC's.
You think
right.
SPLC can provide us?
It's never a good sign, by the way, when you don't just answer any questions and you just go, well, that's the SPLC. We all know, again, common sense, pretending not to understand things. You know, and I know the answer to how many Islamist extremist groups or leftist extremist groups like Antifa. You and I know how many of those groups are on the SPLC's hate map. The answer is 0.
A list of the Islamic-oriented groups do you have on your hate map?
Mr. Roy, we don't target any group because of its religion.
Really?
I want to be clear about that.
Really?
Yes, that's exactly right. We target no group because of its religion. We target groups because they express statements and engage in activities that demean and vilify.
So you brought up LGBTQ groups a second ago.
Roy.
So you brought up LGBT groups a minute ago. So you think there's a bunch of Islamic groups that are pro-LGBTQ? Is that the position of the SPLC? I just want to make sure the record is reflecting that.
And again, the room laughs because that's entirely ridiculous. And again, after all of the calls for murder and violence from leftist groups, again, the SPLC is a sham. Now, we're going to cut away very briefly to a quick commercial break to kind of reset the clock here. And then we're going to come back in. We're going to cover the updates on the United States strikes on 4 different targets. And strangely enough, we currently have a little bit of inception going on, a little bit of Schrodinger's Iranian foreign ministry, who is both claiming they shot down and then didn't shoot down the helicopter. But if they did, they didn't mean to, but they also meant to, and they do it again. Okay. We have a lot more to cover tonight. Don't go anywhere. Tons and tons. Primary results as well. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
I'll be the one you see.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
It's gonna be me.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. We're going to get to some of the primary election results here in a minute. South Carolina's gubernatorial, of course, the U.S. Senate race as well for that primary. And then in Maine, ranked choice voting, you've got Plattner, Janet Mills. Collins is unopposed. We'll get to some of that stuff here in a minute. First, I do want to give you some updates on the current situation in the Middle East. So the president announced this afternoon in his very, President Trumpy fashion. He said, I've just been informed by our great military that last night the Iranians shot down one of our highly sophisticated Apache helicopters while patrolling over the Strait of Hormuz. There were 2 pilots involved. Both are safe and uninjured, which, by the way, in and of itself is an incredible miracle because there are no ejector seats in an Apache helicopter. Right? You ride that going down. Anyway, he said, nevertheless, the United States must, of necessity, respond to this attack. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Now, what followed, and we're going to get to some of the statements and kind of the analysis behind this in a minute here, but the U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, reported right before we went on air, quote, U.S. Central Command forces began launching self-defense strikes against Iran at 5 p.m. Eastern at the Commander-in-Chief's direction in response to yesterday's downing of a U.S. Army Apache helicopter. The mission is a proportional response to unjustified Iranian aggression. So 2 allegations, one from the President of the United States that it was indeed Iran who downed the Apache helicopter, and then from CENTCOM saying these are self-defense strikes, obviously regarding rules regarding engagement with the President of the United States and Congress. Now, that brings us over to the Iranians who, just had a mixed signal fiesta. I have been telling you for weeks that right now in Iran, there's really not a concise idea of who it is that is in charge. There is a lot of hoping and praying that the United States simply walks away and that the president can be convinced that there can't be anything else done and that he has to hang his head in shame and go home. Gas prices in the United States are on their way back down. The blockade in the Strait of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf is holding. And so far, what we've seen is the Iranian regime fighting amongst itself. And I'm going to give you my receipts for that in a second. But nevertheless, there are a number of individuals out there right now that are trying to suggest that Donald Trump has to walk away, that it's all going terribly, that it's all over. The evidence doesn't bear this out. But alas, the Iranian crew, there was a whole fiesta of mixed signals out here. More mixed signals than a French traffic light. So first of all, you had influencers, state media assets from Tehran say, for the record, Iran did not shoot down the helicopter and Trump is lying, but the Islamic Republic is more than prepared to teach the Epstein coalition a lesson. Okay, exciting stuff. At the very same time, you had the Iranian state media. This is the one of the influencer, kind of bot account garbage pieces over on social media, saying Iran says it did shoot down the Apache attack helicopter, but it was unintentional. Yeah, it was unintentional. Oh, you just so happen. I mean, you're with your friends and you're firing rockets into the sky, and just so happen, look, this bird fired a rocket. Not like in the Death Star. It's like, hold your fire. There's no life forms aboard, or the Star Destroyer. At the beginning. No. We're just firing a rocket. Just so happens. Just whoopsie. You just happened to hit an Apache helicopter. Okay, good. And then you have incredible. You have Foreign Minister Syed Abbas Arachi. He's also come out and he's got a different statement. He said, now, despite its defeats on the battlefield, the U.S. opted to test our determination, and our powerful armed forces will leave no attack or threat unanswered. Leave our region if you want to be safe. By the way, individuals who are having a really great time, don't post things like that. That's leave now if you want to be safe. Ooh, no. And then he says the history of the Persian Gulf has many chapters on dire fates of intruding outsiders. And then he has a little Facebook meme, like live, laugh, love. And it's forever Persian Gulf. Now, I happen to remember, and you happen to remember, that the Iranians threw away the whole Persian thing when they went with their, the goat humping Islamic leadership thing. So, no. So now the Iranians are claiming, actually, we did shoot down the helicopter. We meant to shoot down the helicopter, and we'll shoot down all the helicopters. So what's actually going on now once we get past, the media hullabaloo and nonsense festival? So here's what occurred in the retaliatory strike. So air defense and radar sites appear to be among the targets of U.S. retaliatory strikes, missile, drone, airstrike, and naval on Iran, according to CBS News to two officials. A U.S. official to CNN stated the attacks were intended to serve as a warning signal to Iran, and it is estimated that they will not affect negotiations to end the war. Just so that we're all clear, the idea that there are going to be any effective negotiations, like we're just going to cut a deal and run, no. Again, common sense things that normal people understand. What actually needs to happen, we'll talk about that in a second, but I have a map on the screen with 4 nice rounded rectangle squares to tell you about where the United States struck and why. So where did they strike? The United States struck Qeshm Island, which is where the Iranians launch a lot of their rockets and drones from, the Bandar Abbas port, Minab, and Sirik, where there were a couple of explosions that were first reported. Now, there are a couple of other strikes and drones in the air around the rest of the Middle East as well. For example, there are videos of either Shahed or U.S. copy suicide one-way drones that are flying over Iraq. Drone warfare, my favorite. So again, we're covering this situation. There are a couple of additional U.S. strikes that appear to be carried out. Not everything is over. A third wave of airstrikes has just as of 2 minutes ago, who called it, have been launched on Iran, according to several news sources confirmed in the Middle East. So Axios is also now reporting a series of strikes underway against air defense and radar systems in southern Iran. So when I told you a couple of minutes ago that the statement made to CNN that, oh, this was just a little warning, it's probably about over. Nope. Once again, scoreboard. So the Hormozgan province of southern Iran and Bandar Abbas is getting hit. Now for the analysis side, that's what's going to have to happen. The United States is going to have to take cargo. Here are the three things that are going to have to happen. Here you go. Ready? Pesto and presto, prepare for the future. So, number one, the United States is likely going to have to take Karg Island. Now, whether the Saudis or the UAE ends up holding it is anyone's guess. But the United States is going to have to take Karg Island. It's going to have to level Keshem Island and turn it into a beautiful parking lot. It's going to have to flatten a large part of the northern coast of the Persian Gulf, that being the southern coast of Iran. And the United States is going to have to tell the Kurds in Iraq and in western Iran, it's going to have to tell the Kurds, crap or get off the pot, cook or get out of the kitchen, put up or shut up. All right? You've taken a lot of the guns. Some of the guns you were supposed to run to the Iranian people, you chose not to do so. Shocker, the Kurds backing out. Sorry, the Kurds in the United States have a history of saying, you're going to do the thing, right? And the other one goes, uh-huh. And then they don't do the thing. And again, the United States is just as guilty of this as the Kurds are, but the Kurds as well. They're like, oh, we're going to do the thing. And then crickets and then like a tumbleweed. Very, very common. So the Kurds are going to have to be useful, more useful than a doorstop. And the rest of the Gulf State coalition is going to have to, again, cook or get out of the kitchen. Eventually, that's what's going to have to happen. There is no magical Steve Witkoff style deal where the Iranian regime is actually going to do things. It's just not going to happen. There was a chance for a while where President Pez Dispenser, President Pezekian, actually came forward and did some things and some stuff, and the IRGC was ostracized. That ain't happening, Captain. It just ain't. Do you know how we know? Muslim fundamentalists are, you guessed it, Muslim fundamentalists. So that's where things stand. Now, again, you're more than happy, more than welcome to disagree with me on that. But yet again, scoreboard. So that said and aside, we'll keep an update. Now, there are as well a couple of unconfirmed reports from different state-linked news networks suggesting the UAE just attempted to transfer $3 billion in cash to Abu Dhabi, or excuse me, from Abu Dhabi to Tehran aboard a private Boeing 737. First of all, no, the UAE is carrying out active strikes against the Iranians. Number two, boys and girls, $3 billion in bills in the currency of the United Arab Emirates and the dollar for the United States would not fit in any denomination on a Boeing 737. You can't fit $3 billion onto a plane. Stop. Don't. Social media, like breaking news reports. Nope. Don't just go after that. So that brings us over to some of the wonderful, fantastical, exciting primary results of joy and excitement. I know you were so excited for some of the primary results stuff. Boy, howdy, so was I. So let's get into a couple of them. It did bleed into today because in one very hilarious moment during the SPLC committee, Representative Brandon Gill of Texas decided to take things in a different way and talk a little bit about everyone's favorite Maine Führer, Graham Plattner. Here's how that exchange went today.
What about this tattoo? Do you have an opinion on this tattoo?
For those who are listening and not watching, he is holding up a picture of Graham Plattner with his Totenkopf Nazi tattoo.
I'm not an expert on tattoos. No, I don't.
So you have the head of the SPLC initially tries to go, I don't know tattoos. I don't know anything at all. Nothing. And it doesn't last long because Gil doesn't let it go.
Okay. I can give you a little bit of background. This is a tattoo on Maine Democrat Senate candidate Graham Plattner's chest. That's the Nazi SS death head tattoo. Do you have any opinions on that?
If it's what you say, if it's a Nazi symbol, we oppose Nazis.
So eventually, and I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here, he does eventually get him to say, look, would you back this kind of a guy for the Senate or not? You're supposed to be the moral voice of the left when it comes to fighting racism.
He opposes Nazis and Nazi symbols. The answer is yes.
Yep. The SPLC has referred to this same tattoo as a racist skinhead symbol and tattoo. You can see the resemblance there.
So yes, the CEO, the new CEO, again, backed into a corner, says, well, yeah, we wouldn't like him to be in the Senate at all. So ends up agreeing. Curious stuff. And this did become kind of a crux point here. Congressman Russell Fry from South Carolina's 7th also tangled with the SPLC a little bit on this today. Very, very good stuff for a number of reasons. But again, regarding, this kind of bizarre standard here, you're going to have to play ball. When you invoke the racial argument, it goes both ways.
If somebody does a Nazi salute in a public forum or in public view, would that be a factor?
It could be.
Could be, okay. What about burning a cross?
It could be a factor depending on the context.
Okay. Have tattoos like Nazi symbols?
We believe that Nazi symbols are symbols of hate. Yeah.
So the question that's being asked by Congressman Russell Fry here is, hey, you have a series of standards, theoretically, for putting people on the hate map. So why isn't Graham Plattner on the hate map? I mean, he's said some really gross things. He has a lot of the same, a lot of the same symbology. So why isn't he on there? So he says, instead of taking accountability, we got excuses, evasions, word games. And we actually got a statement from Russell Fry to the show. He said, quote, "For years, the SPLC labeled Americans as extremists, putting them on a so-called hate list. Yet they couldn't clearly explain the standard used for calling people hateful, evil. He said, let's be clear. Their so-called experts behind closed doors don't care about fighting hate. They're only focused on targeting people they disagree with politically. And that is the core point of the matter. That's the issue with Graham Plattner. Democrats like Ro Khanna, who spent months going after anyone on the right. Oh, they're part of the Epstein class. Oh, they're going after all of these people. How could they possibly live with themselves? All of a sudden had to turn around and make this bizarre endorsement of Graham Plattner, a guy who was accused of texting a bunch of minors on Kick. And by the way, up until last week, fully active on his account. It's bizarre stuff. Here's Ro Khanna saying that, well, I actually support him because, well, he opposes war or something.
If the Democratic Party is going to exist, it needs to become the anti-war party. I fucking love this place.
I don't know why you want to go to the Senate.
I think
so. They do this like, I love Maine. Maine is so wonderful and exciting, and it does this little little bro date to Maine. Ro Khanna and Graham Plattner.
A lot of people in this country would like to see more regular people in politics, and most people in this country have gone through some form of transformation throughout their
regular people in politics. How many regular people are walking around, again, a bunch of domestic abuse allegations, just bought cocaine a couple of years ago, again, the Nazi tattoo. And you'll hear about his PTSD from war. He's like, oh, I'm anti-war. When he came home from his tours of service, he turned around and went to work for Blackwater, the private military company. And by the way, as someone who has fraternized, shall we say, with some of the PMCs out there in the contractor world, Blackwater is the lowest rung on the PMC ladder. Other than that, what, the French? I mean, this guy turned around, the PTSD, and then, by the way, lambasts and scums a bunch of actual, genuine PTSD veterans by saying, well, I mean, when you have PTSD, what you do is you act like a Nazi and you want everyone to die, and maybe you domestically batter some women, and then maybe you message a bunch of minors from your towel profile pictured Kick Messenger account. Anywho, because normal veterans don't actually get home and act like that who have PTSD. Anyway, also, normal veterans who actually are dealing with crippling PTSD don't turn around and work for Blackwater.
lives. They've not been living perfect lives all the time.
What do you say to someone that says, oh, Ro, I agree with Graham's policies. I'm glad you're going there. But after the stuff coming out, my granddaughter. What do you say to someone like that?
If you believe in transformational politics, you need to believe in the ability for people to transform.
He has an active messaging account, again, which had his picture up, talking to minors. 5 days ago, this last week, that account was open. He was cheating on his wife in 2023. Oh, I believe in the ability of anyone to transform, magical, excite. Okay, yep, that's just super and duper. Regarding some of the main races and such, right now there are people that are issuing a lot of calls, and we have people that are rushing in to make these kind of calls. I very strongly suggest, if somebody is already, calling any kind of race, hang on a second. So far, there really isn't any voting information here. A lot of people are going to rush in and try to claim some things early. Also, there are a couple of details on the South Carolina races. We'll get into those as well here, because there's a lot more to this evening than just what's going on over in Maine. So in South Carolina, in the gubernatorial race, Trump endorsed Lieutenant Governor Pamela Yvette, currently leads with 28% of the vote, and 14% of the vote is in. Alan Wilson has 25% of the vote. Ron Reddy has 18%. Ralph Northam has 16%. Nancy Mace has under 11%. So we're keeping an eye on the South Carolina results as well. There are some Senate elections, some live up-to-the-minute stuff here. On the Democrat primary side, you've got Jermaine Johnson, who is currently up. 44% of the votes are now counted, 58%, compared to Billy Webster and Mullins McLeod with 31% and 10.4% respectively. On the Republican side, again, 31% of the votes are counted for the primary. Pam Yvette is up 28% to Alan Wilson's 25%, and then followed by Ralph Norman. Excuse me, not Northam. I apologize. I thought that was weird. Ralph Norman, not Northam. For the Republicans at 16.8%, Ron Reddy at 16%, and then Nancy Mace is down at 11%. So we're going to keep an eye on some of that stuff as well. Keep an eye on that stuff as well. So in the meantime, I did want to mention one final little exciting scandal for Graham Plattner. He's still doubling and tripling down on being just a regular run-of-the-mill oyster farmer and trying to go after Fox News for reporting on his Senate campaign website being launched and registered far before his oyster farmer business website. By the way, that is objectively true. I mean, his campaign website was launched almost a year before his little oyster farmer business website, which, by the way, so far it only appears to sell oysters to his mommy's restaurant. So the dude's just a complete fake. Also, he's an AstroTurf candidate. He's not just an average guy. Like when Joe Biden said, the day I decided to run for president was the day of the Charlottesville rally. I said, oh no. Roughly translated, that is, the day I decided to run for election is when I saw the Charlottesville rally, which we've already talked about with the SPLC. Graham Plattner is trying the same routine. No one believes that either. It is two former Bernie Sanders staffers that have been grooming Plattner for years on this stuff. And even admitted in an interview, yeah, we knew about his Reddit post where he said, that he only gets off in porta potties and other really weird, creepy, garbage. We just thought that wouldn't matter. So what Democrats are learning right now is that it is an entirely different thing to win a primary than win in the general. Republicans learned this election back in 22. Now, I know that a lot of you guys out there, and justifiably so, we'll disagree on some of the candidates Republicans ran that, some say, well, the election was stolen from them in 22. I say they were really awful candidates. Could be a bit of both. Who knows? But I will say this. Republicans, by and large, learned that just having a person who's really excitable and as Trumpy as possible doesn't make them a great candidate for the general election. Democrats are about to go through this with Tallarico. They think that they can get James Tallarico out there who can just lie about all of the stuff he used to support, and now he's pro-oil, and he eats meat, and he's a super-duper Christian guy. Right-a-diddly-do. And that'll totally work. That's not going to work. They'll cover up his radicalness with a nice spray coat painting of Abigail Spanberger. That ain't going to happen. And then they're going to try to do the same thing in Maine. Oh, I'm just like you. I'm of the land. I'm a farmer. People don't like me because I'm anti-war. And you can just get rid of the fact that he's, again, a former Blackwater mercenary. Nothing wrong with being a mercenary. Sorry, I didn't throw that out there. Personal reasons included. But to say You know, he was a Blackwater mercenary who's anti-war, who's totally for women except when he shakes them like rag dolls and then kidnaps them, locks them in rooms. And also, you know, is super pro-veteran except the ones that he said deserved to die. And is super pro-farmer except for all of the super socialist policies of land confiscation that he's for. Then he's super pro-transparency except for the fake, pseudo-fake oyster farming business that he created. Guys, this ain't going to function. This is not going to fit in the general. Now, we do have a couple of calls that we can project at this point from the Decision Desk, our friends over at the Decision Desk headquarters. They are predicting now that Lindsey Graham will win the South Carolina U.S. Senate Republican primary. Not a surprise call. The AP hasn't called it yet, but the AP is in the middle of their own scandal today after admitting before some kind of hearing that they don't even follow their own AP style guide. So that's another thing for another time. So the Decision Desk also projects that Annie Andrews is going to win the South Carolina U.S. Senate Democratic primary. And I'm also getting a bizarre note. This is Annie Andrews, the Democrat politician, not the adult actress. I don't think I needed that note, but okay, thank you very much. Okay, great. All right. So again, both South Carolina U.S. Senate primary races are called now. Annie Andrews, apparently not the adult actress. I don't know what that means, but that's great. I mean, I know what that means, but I don't know who they're referring to. That's weird. For the Democrat primary, and then Lindsey Graham for the Republican primary, who I am assuming is also called for North Carolina to the north to be hit by a couple of airstrikes in the meantime. So exciting, good times, wonderful over on the election side of things. Now, so far, according to the Decision Desk, very few votes are in, but Graham Plattner is running essentially unopposed. David Costello is running against him, getting a couple of votes. Janet Mills, so far, we don't have very much in there. I just don't feel comfortable giving you guys kind of what I sort of think might also kind of maybe. There's one last sort of rumor that I thought I would bring before you guys because it's really funny before I get to some mail time. I mean, really, this one's hilarious. I think you'll enjoy it. Supposedly, Anyway, supposedly, there is a Barry Weiss, who's being called Trump ally. Again, super pro LGBTQ, ran the Free Press, also very pro-choice. Not exactly a right-wing lady, but she tries to be very fair on the press. Who's run CBS, is now being maybe eyed as set to take over CNN after a Paramount Warner Bros. Merger is complete. I doubt it. I highly, highly doubt it. Now, would that be good for CNN? Yeah, I mean, I think Barry Weiss has done a good job of running CBS, despite not firing enough people so far. But we'll see. Do I think that there's really anything to this? A couple of you have emailed me this and messaged me about this. Do I think that Barry Weiss is going to run CNN? Probably not. We will see. So that said, while we're waiting on more on the primary results side, I will do what you guys have been asking for. Just a little bit of mail time. Mail time. Mail time.
On the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Okay, so right up front here, how you do the mail time thing, you send us questions, one of two ways to do so. I highly recommend, instead of using the live chat that you can see over here on the screen right now, I recommend you go to our description. There's a link to our Discord. There is a mail time channel there where I'm scrolling through right now to answer some of the questions, because every show's got to have a mail time segment. It's not special. It's not incredibly amazing. You got to have one. You know, that's just the way that it'd be. So let's dig into some of these. From Holstein, says, Tony is one with a science background. That's right. Former science teacher and then administrator. Do you think that the Antares Mark 0 microreactor that achieved criticality at the Idaho National Laboratory will quell popular fears about data centers usurping electricity and water resources around the country, which are driving residential costs way up? Or will the no nukes mindset, especially in the less urban areas, undermine this breakthrough? So the answer to your question is yes and no. Yes on the electricity, eventually. No on the water. So I'm looking into this actively right here, right now. I mean, there are a couple of data center firms that I'm talking to, trying to get real, actual data. because I'm tired of the fear mongering. I'm tired of Bernie Sanders saying that the AI, unless China does it, China can do whatever. The AI is going to take all of us. It's going to be terrible. Oh my gosh, the AI. I mean, there's that. And then you also have the same thing on the hyper-popular. I mean, there's going to be AI driving the trucks. Kind of crap. So both of the crews that say AI is going to kill us all is just fear-mongering because you've seen the Terminator series. I'm sorry. It's just the truth. However, yeah, AI is using a lot of power. And it's also using a lot of water. Now, there are two things. Count them, two.
Answer there, the Daily Double.
That people need to keep in mind. Thing number one is that, yes, for the moment, AI is actually using a fair bit of water. We're still looking to see how much it ends up using because there's several different cooling techniques. And what does it do with the water? The water evaporates into the atmosphere, meaning that it doesn't stay in your local area's water table. That's a concern. Again, we are looking to see what that is long term. Number two, that brings us to the electrical thing. If nuclear reactors made smaller and more efficient are a success, and AI data centers end up becoming the homes of nuclear reactors all over the country, that's awesome. That is going to sink energy prices in the long term. Nuclear energy is the way to go. Absolutely. Every left-wing hippie who saw Chernobyl and thought, oh no, it has no idea how nuclear power works, has no idea there's like next to no waste that is created. Nuclear power will help us leverage very, very cheap oil, gas, and coal. And by gas, I mean the natural gas kind. So it's a mixed bag. Do I think that this alone is going to disparage fears? No, I don't think so. Do I think that it will play a part? Maybe. We'll see. Big tech has historically made huge advances and also royally screwed it up by snatching defeat out of the jaws of victory. Because big tech will get to feeling its oats and getting really cocky and then do like 30 stupid things in a row. Because corporations have ego just as politicians and political movements do. Just the way that goes. All right, next question. I'm not sold, by the way, or determinate. I'm just kind of telling you that's kind of my take on it. I'm sorry. There's one comment that I just saw that cracked me up. I can't see on the live stream who sent it. It said, Tony, when I put water in the freezer and take it out, what happens to the water? Good jokes, good times. And the water is clearly taken by the Jews. That would be the answer. Or assassinated by Israel. To quote Candace Owens, the illiterate. So anyway, from Nut Smasher, a name I quite appreciate there. On a 1 to 10 scale, what likelihood would you give that Pakistan would become hostile to Iran if any of their tripwire troops are injured or killed in a missile attack in Saudi Arabia? Not until the Chinese officially cut Iran loose. When the Chinese have decided that Iran is totally and completely a lost cause, Pakistan will turn on Iran. Here's Pakistan's foreign policy. On Monday, I listen to what mommy tells me. That's China. On Tuesday, I listen to what daddy tells me. That's the United States. Pakistan is the 20-year-old child of a divorced couple who is trying to play them off of each other. That's Pakistan. There you go. Now you know. Play the more you know graphic on the screen. So next question. Could the Saudis enact their defensive pact? No. The Saudis need to develop testicles. They haven't done so yet. Any day now. I think the Saudis would be a great ally, but they have to decide they have skin in the game. And the Saudis also don't want to piss off Egypt and Turkey, but it's time. Because Turkey sucks. Anywho, from Jennifer, this might be a stupid question. Probably not. You have no idea how many amazingly phrased questions we get that don't make it to air. When do American citizens get to hold our representatives that act like they hate us, call us Nazis and so on, and have not held their oath to protect and serve the American people? When do American citizens, I think you're asking, get to hold the representatives accountable beside the voting box? Well, the answer is the voting box is it, unless they commit a crime. And the reason is the 17th Amendment says your state can't recall senators anymore. Used to, you were able to. Now you can't. That's it. This is why primaries matter. Now, a lot of people don't like that. And the reason that a lot of people don't like that is because if someone's doing something I don't like, I should be able to hold them accountable now, right? Well, you're a citizen of the country, which means by not casting a vote, you're casting a vote. Now, libertarians hate this, but it's the truth. By not casting a vote, you are casting a vote. you as a citizen, and again, this is why I don't think everyone should be citizens. This is why I believe in the citizens versus residents, legal residents bifurcation set about in, for example, the book, not the movie, Starship Troopers. But in this case, to make it quite clear, I think that if you don't cast a vote, well, then you're owed. I mean, that is the wager you place as a citizen. You are saying, I count on you to do what I want. You should be voting in primaries. Well, I don't think my vote is counted. Okay, whether you do or don't, and I hear you, but whether you do or don't, you still have skin in the game. You do. That's the way the Constitution set up congressmen to be held accountable. We don't believe in the Frenchman's guillotine here. We don't. Yet. So that's my answer. Even if I don't like the answer to that question, by the way, that's the answer. You can't just press charges because you don't like somebody. They actually have to do something criminal. Sometimes things aren't criminal. Sometimes things are just scummy. And this is something that Americans also don't really like either, but it is the truth, as rough as it is to hear. Meg M94 says, as a Frisco resident, I'm worried that there's going to be riots and property destruction. What do you think the likelihood of riots are? In the state of Texas, damn near zero. Do I think that Abbott, at this time, I think law enforcement shows up? Ain't happening. Now, I mean, are there going to be like other riots elsewhere? We'll have to see. It could be. Do I think that just because Karmelo Anthony wasn't exactly super duper shining, whatever it was as well. Hey, please don't spam the chat with your garbage. So that kind of said, and Steph said an aside, I don't think there's going to be riots. Good question. Now, last question here from Roy says, look, Republicans aren't the ones that riot. That's the Democrats. To be clear, I want to make sure that everyone knows what my standard are when I say riot. So a protest is when you assemble together and you yell and you scream and you shout, but you do not violate the law. The second your protest violates the law, it destroys property, it assaults an officer, it's a riot, by definition. And I get the sentiment and I agree to a degree. However, there were aspects and elements of certain recent events, some of which were justified, some of which weren't, that fit the legal definition of riots. They do. And so that's why when I say riots, that's not like a damning of moral value at all. That's simply saying there's a definition there. So do I think there will be protests? Maybe a few. Do you think there's going to be like big riots over this? I don't think so. It's a different country. I don't see that as being kind of the big thing. So that said, Decision Desk headquarters also projects Pamela Yvette and Alan Wilson to advance in the Republican gubernatorial primary. Oh, do they have runoffs there? I'm sorry. I hate runoffs. I do. I think runoffs are silly. I think that people should care about the primary and it should matter. I hate ranked choice voting. I hate runoffs. I think they're dumb. I don't like it. Anyway, that's another topic for another time. The Decision Desk also projects that Jermaine Johnson wins the South Carolina Democratic gubernatorial primary. So interesting stuff indeed. There are a couple of other elections tonight on the primary side. We are not going to be awake long enough to dive into those. That's a five-way race down there in South Carolina. I still don't believe in runoffs. I'm sorry. That's just my take. You guys may not like it. It may not be the best, but that is my take. So that aside, there was one very kind super chat before we're done this evening from Patrick. Said, wouldn't it be weird if the Sudanese incident caused the unification of the Finian IRA types and the ultra orange boys against alien culture? Sure would be ironic. As the most pro and friendly to Catholics Baptist I think that is out there, as the indie fundy, who is very, very friendly to a lot of Catholics despite the theological disagreements, would I like to see a lot of Christian culture unite against the kind of threat against Islam? Absolutely. Now, do I think that what is going to happen in Belfast tonight, based on what I've seen so far, going to turn out wholly good? No, I don't. When I see just like setting cars and vans and buses on fire and sending them rolling down the street, is that good? No, I don't. I just don't. I don't think that's going to turn out well. Do I think that we're eventually going to see a mob that ends up assaulting individuals who are more or less just like innocent, normal people? Yeah, because that's what mobs do. Is it as calculated and as, to the point as kind of American revolutionary stuff? Doubtful. Do I want it to be? Yeah, I do. And I'm a guy who said, I think that we should be running guns to Ireland and the UK. I have said that here on the air. I do. The same shopkeepers and gardeners who used to manufacture one of the greatest submachine guns of all time, the Sten Mark II submachine gun. God bless it. The best thing that ever came out of home projects and inspired by the Thompson submachine gun. Anyway, aside from that note, do I think that should come back? Yes, absolutely. Do I think that now's that time? Maybe. We'll have to see. You definitely have to. We'll have to see kind of how that goes. And yes, Karmelo Anthony has been sentenced to 35 years for the murder of Austin Metcalf. 35 years. So it looks like the plea for super duper mercy again. Do I think he should be given life in prison? Yeah, I do. But I also am of the opinion most often that I don't think that being on permanent taxpayer timeout is, super duper either. So those things said, we'll kind of keep you guys up to date. If there's any other information, there are current reports, by the way, right now of the Keshem coastal missile position and Keshem commercial port, the island, the biggest island in the Strait of Hormuz area, in the Persian Gulf. So interesting developments there. I mean, honestly, I think the United States should probably take Karg at this point, but we'll have to see how things move here in the next couple of days and weeks. We'll keep you up to date on it. We'll go live sooner if we have an opportunity. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Y'all, take care.